There we are.
Hello. Well,
Hello.
welcome to Smarten Up on the Messianic Lamb Network, School Pods Canada Facebook page, and YouTube channel. And what else do we have going on?
We're everywhere. We are in your living room.
Well, we are excited to be here with you discussing anything education, parenting, and just the times to be raising children. And it's interesting times. So hope everyone's well and your kids are not too hyper from the treats from from Halloween. Because we, even if you don't celebrate it, you somehow get candy. It just floats around.
It's all over the place. So it's we're living in fascinating times right now.
Yeah.
And it's extremely dangerous. I think for a lot of people, things are becoming more and more dangerous. And one of the reasons is, we're going to show you a quick picture here.
So a picture to show the sign of the times and what is happening. I think if any picture could express it, this would be the one, because we want to go into what does it mean to live in the times today, and how do we raise the next generation in these times. So do you have that ready to go?
Yeah, there we go.
So this is something I found on Facebook, and yes, I still hang out there because, well, a lot of people still hang out there, and I found this picture which says what the human race is suffering from is mass hypnosis. And I think if you take a look at the picture there, our phones, a big proponent of that. And the greatest form of control is where you think, when you think you're free, when you're being fundamentally manipulated and dictated to. And maybe we can talk a little bit more about how we're being manipulated. And listen, it's up to us whether we allow that to happen. But at the same time, it is being done. And if you take a look at the picture here in the background, there's, advertisement is a big component. News, what's happening in the news. There's obviously things that tug at our emotions, things that promise to satisfy needs and appetites we have. And I haven't even seen all the details, fashion, movie stars, politics, things like that.
But the most telling is how it depicts the people.
Well, yeah, and the people behind us laid in the foreground. So this looks like Times Square in New York or any big city. Instead of people, they're sheep.
Yep.
So we have spoken in previous shows that the Bible does speak about us as sheep.
Yes.
And God being the good shepherd. And, sometimes being a sheep, it's an endearing thing. Because anyone who has ever been around sheep, well, they're kind of cute. Silly. And, they do funny things. And, they're endearing. But there are times it could be quite frustrating. And they're always trying to run through a fence somewhere, find a way out to escape. Why are we talking about sheep? Well, first of all, because the Bible, the symbolism for us is God's sheep, and we're a flock that God tends to. But also because our understanding of things is so limited. And so just like sheep, we just kind of go and react on emotions, needs. And so this picture just shows that really everything that is trying to manipulate it is trying to appeal to that, to our emotions, our appetites, our desires, our needs, our wants. And that's one of the lessons actually I did with our pod. What's the difference between need and want?
Well, and that's something that society in general is trying to confuse today, that they want us to believe that what we want is what we need, and furthermore, they're going to dictate what we need. And they do that through, they call it mass formation psychosis, and there's all kinds of psychological terms, but the Bible calls it a great delusion or a strong delusion.
Yeah.
And I think we're witnessing that. I mean, we saw that certainly through the last 3.5 years with COVID, that a strong delusion, there were things that were being told to us that, of course, are now coming out now to have not been true. Now, there were a certain segment of the population that always understood that. And I think that's kind of where the freedom movement was born out of, that we want to be free from the dictates of tyrannical government. But the vast majority of people, even people who should know better, bought into the narrative without even questioning it, because the government told us so, as if the government can be trusted.
Well, and living here in North America and Canada, I mean, my family came to Canada over 30 years ago, seeking, I guess, opportunities, seeking some kind of stability, and coming from communist regime. We knew that there was no oppression here. We knew that people had freedoms and the government took care of its citizens. So that's why we came to Canada. And, it wasn't too long after we started doing paperwork, we realized that there's limitations because there's laws and rules and regulations. And we too believe that law is a good thing if it is helping people to function better together. But when the law is not for your well-being, then we are starting to get into issues. And so 30 years ago, we used to joke about Canada was, in Canada, you can do everything except between these hours, and you have to pay for this fee. And then there's this limitation. So there's the exceptions that when you can't do that. So quickly we realized that coming out of dictatorship type of environment, that here you have freedom. And this is why this picture really appealed to me, because people really believe that are free here. And I will tell you one thing, our family coming here with education and just desire to achieve something and to have a better life. One of the things that really shocked us was the fact that there were a lot of people here in North America on social assistance. We had no such thing. Now, I know during communism, everything was provided for free, but we knew there was a cost to us, because the government used to tell us, well, you can't do this. You can't, nobody could really have a private business. That was, you were co-opted into some kind of government initiative. You were not really allowed to be independent and have a private business. So that's why when I met you and you were so entrepreneurial, and I'm like, I have no idea how to run a business, because that was not available to us in Eastern Europe.
I mean, your stepfather came and he started his own business when he was here, but
well, eventually it was, we started with the whole employee thing. And I have to tell you, and this is one thing I want to share with families, because I know Canada is made up of a lot of families that come from different cultures and backgrounds. And I know 30 years ago when we came here, my parents, they had university degrees. And so I was high school age when I arrived. And they said, just like they say here in North America, get good education, pay attention in school, get good marks, go to university, get good education, get a good job, and then you'll be set for life. You know, you have, if you work for the government, especially, you'll have benefits, you're good. And you know what? In Canada at the time, there was good social assistance, but we did notice that a lot of people were not even working and striving to be professionals, but they were starting to realize. So there was this laziness. And from the eyes of an immigrant who had to fight tooth and nail to get to this country, to us, it was like, there's so many opportunities. Why are the people here not taking advantage of these opportunities that are available? You can have your own business. You can do so many things. You can get good jobs. And so as a teenager, though, because my parents, that's the path they went through, I applied to university. I made sure I get good marks. And I have to tell you that probably the worst time of my life is when I finished my Bachelor of Science degree. Because then I said to myself, I have this university degree in my hand. It's science, you know, I mean, they look for science-minded people. And I started calling different medical places. I remember my most memorable place I called to apply was Sanofi Pasteur, which was the vaccine company in Toronto. And I think, you know, at the time it hit me really hard, but I'm thankful now that they were as honest with me as they were, because they asked me, they said, do you have a family member that works for our company? I said, no, I don't. Do you have any friends or anyone who already works for us? Any employees of ours? I said, no, I don't. I'm new to this country. I don't know anyone. I want this opportunity that we were promised coming to this country. And they said, nope, we only hire internally, and we do not take people from the outside. So unless you know someone, no, you don't have a chance with us. And there goes the phone conversation.
That's called nepotism. That's basically the way the government works now.
Well, but quickly I realized that there were some things, and you know what, someone who really worked hard to get my education, and it wasn't easy. It was very competitive. Where I was in McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, and anyone who studied science there, I mean, McMaster is a research university. Some of the best researchers and scientists were in that university. So it was competitive. It was not an easy thing to do.
They even have a nuclear power plant on site.
They do. And my residence was facing, my window was facing.
So that would explain the glow that sometimes.
I glow some days. Anyway.
The Geiger counter goes off. Run away! She's radioactive again.
And you know what? There's nothing wrong with research, scientific research. I still have a big passion for science. What really guided me,
Not the little guy in the States that said he was science, right?
No.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify that.
Science is not a person. Okay. So, what really guided me was this hope that I have equal opportunity with everybody else. And that to me was really, really sad. And at some point, I think even in my early 20s after university, I decided, well, you know, if nobody wants me and I have to know people and I'm newcomer to this country, well, I have no chance. I just made that. And, you know, the advice my parents gave me worked back home. They didn't realize it didn't work in this society here. Yeah. So they had all the best of intentions. And I know there are a lot of families out there who the parents have immigrated to give better life for their kids in this country. And they give them advice that they learned back home. And Canada has always been seen, and the United States, as the countries of opportunity, the American dream. You know, you come here to make it big. And you're faced with hard reality that you have to know people, you have to submit to certain rules and regulations. You have to pay a lot of money. There's always a condition. It's not a true freedom. And so, yeah, at some point I decided partying is the way of life. And I started falling into the category, why bother?
Mm-hmm.
Work hard.
Which is especially prevalent with someone with your personality type.
Well, I like fun anyway. Who doesn't? But this is why advertisements
The accounting
work.
students, they didn't like fun.
Right, accounting. And yeah, if you're in accounting, you don't like fun. No, I knew people in accounting and they did. But yes,
Our accountant's fun.
More, yes. They could be more tempered. But anyway, I soon after, though, realized that not doing anything in your life gives you no purpose to live, and that's a very sad kind of existence.
Yes.
So I had to find some kind of purpose. Now God found me. I searched. I went to different places because you know what? For personal fulfillment, spirituality is a big component of that. I mean, your career and having a purpose, a goal in life is important, but spirituality is very important.
Yeah.
That helped me. That helped me with a lot of things, kind of the despair. So I found hope again. Mm-hmm. But things are still not easy.
No, of course they're not. And we know that this world is not easy. It was George Carlin who famously said in one of his stand-up routines that it's a big club and you're not in it. And there are a lot of people who are in this club. There are a lot of people who the system has now been set up where you have a certain minority and a very small minority of the population who are in on the take, and money is transferring hands between them. I mean, look what happened in COVID, just to give you an example. All of these businesses got shut down except for some select of the big few. Ones, yeah. And so you had, Amazon that increased its net worth by tens of billions. I think Jeff Bezos made something like $4 billion in 2020 alone when all the lockdowns started.
Well, you order from home because you're stuck at home.
But Costco was open, and you could go in there and fraternize with hundreds of people. Yeah, I mean, they made you mask up and all this stuff. Yeah. But the reality is you got to gather. And Walmart was the same thing. I remember that there were some churches that decided the churches were closed down. Walmart wasn't. So they went and had church service over in Walmart.
Well, and the thing is, though, so what COVID did is kind of reinforce what I learned in my mid to late 20s is that you don't have equal opportunity. No. And so that hope that I had was slowly dying. Now it was reignited with God. But at that time, I started my teaching in a public school system. And I realized that just like in the vaccine company, in the school system, you had to know someone. Yeah. I realized that my degree, they weren't really looking at my qualifications, my experience, because I made sure that I love working with children. So I made sure I had what they told me they need on paper. First of all, the school... One of the school boards I worked for, I probably won't mention which one, kept on losing my paperwork.
Yeah, because you weren't supposed to be working there, and that was God trying to tell you, no.
At the same time, I was just, it's almost like reality was smacking me in the face. So here from a teenager to 20-something-year-old getting into the workforce, and then just starting to move along, I realized everywhere I turned, there was no equal opportunity. And so one of the things you and I wanted to talk about is that our society, that kind of like inequality is being emphasized and grown over time as we are moving along.
Well, what was really laid upon my heart to discuss today was, as you look about what's going on around the world and what's happening over the Middle East is extraordinarily frightening. Because, biblically, Israel is being used by God to bring judgment to the world. And, God even says that he is going to put a hook in the jaw. Because, how do you catch a fish? How do you catch a shark? You throw a hook in the water, it bites onto it, and then you yank it out.
Yeah.
And what is happening now is that, there's this massacre a month ago in Israel by Hamas, and of the most brutal form. I mean, when you see some of the pictures, and for the people out there who are denying that this happened and saying that there's no proof, it is an absolute lie, and they have to be summarily dismissed, because there's more evidence than to do. There's pictures and
Right.
videos posted all over the
Now,
place.
just a little disclaimer here, because I have friends think that because we speak that obviously what Hamas had done is horrific and Israel did not deserve that.
Mhm.
Because of biblical prophecy, we know that Israel is not completely innocent.
Oh no.
But that kind of brutality is not warranted
No,
in any time.
I mean, whatever your beliefs about the complicity of the Israeli government is a separate issue altogether.
It is.
We know that the Israeli government is in favor of the people, and you can go way down the rabbit hole with that.
But the reason we speak about this is because we know how God views the people of Israel.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
that's the standpoint we come from.
Right. And it's also my people. I mean, this is my
and
heritage.
You are Jewish too.
Okay,
Yes.
so
your family did,
so
Israel.
whatever the government was involved in, the fact of the matter is 1,400 people were murdered in I mean, there were babies that were burnt alive, and they have video evidence of this.
This is a family environment.
Well, no, I mean, because where we're going next with this is really going to help set the table for what we need to talk about from an education standpoint of view. So Israel says, that's it, we're going into Gaza. We've got to root out Hamas once and for all. And they do. And the Gaza Strip is the most densely populated place in the world. There's 2.3 million people that are in, for all intents and purposes, a refugee camp. Do they deserve to be there? Well, it's a complicated history. And I can tell you this right now, it's not Israel's fault. Okay? Israel did not want the Palestinian problem. And as a matter of fact, back in 2005, when Ariel Sharon, to his own demise, handed Gaza over to the Palestinians, he says, we're releasing control. We're allowing you to take care of yourselves. You can self-govern. And what do? They go elect Hamas.
Right. And it's very complicated history. So we just want to get the lesson out of us, I guess.
But it's important to lay that foundation.
Yeah.
So Israel hands over self-governance to the Palestinians. And you got to remember also that the Palestinians have essentially been kicked out of every other country in the Middle East. Okay.
Yes.
They were kicked out of Jordan. And on the way out, they assassinated the prime minister. They've been kicked out of Lebanon. They started the PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, started the civil war in Lebanon in 1975. Up until then, Lebanon was a fairly secular country, and Beirut was known as the Paris of the Middle East. It was a beautiful city. PLO gets in there. You have strife that starts. You have division that starts, and this is where we're going with this. They initiate a civil war that lasted 17 years up until 1992. Lebanon has never recovered. And now they've got these spiritual cockroaches, Hezbollah, which is an Iranian proxy that rules the south. The Lebanese do not want Hezbollah in there, but Hezbollah's sole purpose is to create terror against Israel on the northern border.
So it is complex situation.
Right. So... But what happens is Israel goes into Gaza and says, we're getting rid of Hamas, and, we're going to take vengeance. And any other country in the world, that would be totally justified, but not in Israel's case. Israel goes in, they start, their campaign. They're still doing the best that they can to not target citizens. But they see the problem is that Hamas has its headquarters underneath a hospital.
And hiding behind civilians.
They use civilians as human shields and always have. And it was even one of the Hamas leaders, by the way, who's a billionaire and who lives in exile in luxury over in Qatar or whatever other Arab country is putting him up, says that women and children have to die for the cause of Palestine.
Right. So it is a belief. And the thing is, though, we are shocked at this point of the complexity, But if we look through history and through the Bible, it's not a new tactic.
So,
and
but what happens
is
when Israel goes in and they start to attack Hamas, Hamas is expert at propaganda because the devil's a liar. And he comes to steal, kill, and destroy. It says that he is the father of lies. And so everything that Hamas releases, including the number of dead, I mean, they blamed Israel for bombing that hospital. It was their own failed rocket that fell on the hospital. But what happened is that the entire world turned around and said, oh, Israel bad. And now you've got demonstrations that are rising. Have you seen the videos?
I try not to be honest.
Of demonstrations in the tens and even hundreds of thousands of people who are marching around with Palestinian flags, Hamas flags, and they're chanting, from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free.
Right. And you know what? You actually made a good point that
thank you.
You made many, but one of them I just kind of wanted to go. You did one good point today. I wanted to.
I can leave now.
I wanted to go into that. The truth is absolute, and so in other circumstances, if other countries are attacked, they would be justified to defend themselves, and they would be
nobody questioned the U.S. getting involved in World War II after Pearl Harbor was attacked by the Japanese.
Right. So what I'm talking about here is that with all the propaganda, with all the lies and things that we know, like now after COVID, we've realized that everything's being manipulated. All information that gets to us is being manipulated.
Yes.
With all of that stuff, we are now understanding that in one situation, the same behavior could be justified. And in another situation, we're emotionally manipulated to say, oh, no. Hamas is okay because they have the right to do that.
Well,
or whatever.
They're fighting oppression. Israel are colonizers, which isn't true. Number one, there's no such thing as Palestine. There's no such thing as a Palestinian. It's a made-up name. And if you look at the history, it was the Roman Emperor Hadrian, after the Bar Kokhba rebellion in 135, when they completely razed Jerusalem to the ground and kicked the Jews out of Rome, that he changed the name of Israel to Philistia after the Philistines.
Right.
And that's so when you anglicize it, that's where you get Palestine from. So there is no historical country called Palestine. There is no historical people called Palestinians. They were primarily Jordanians and Egyptian. Yasser Arafat was actually born in Egypt, and he was an Egyptian. And if you look back in, and there was, I saw an interview from Golda Meir, who was the prime minister of Israel back during the Yom Kippur War in 1973. In 1970, she did an interview with a British station, I think it was the BBC or ITV or one of them, and she was saying that she is a Palestinian because Palestine, the Balfour Declaration that was written in 1917 to give the Jewish people their ancestral homeland, not a homeland. Adolf Hitler had a plan for the Jews to have their own homeland, and he initially chose Madagascar to be it. But that never worked out because that was never God's plan. That was never where he intended them to be. But before the Holocaust, before the final solution was ever devised, Hitler had a plan to expel the Jews from Europe and replace them or resettle them in Madagascar. That didn't work. The world wasn't in favor for it. So he said, okay, well, let's just wipe them out. So, Israel is reestablished as a nation, which, by the way, fulfills biblical prophecy. It said that they would be reborn in one day. A nation was formed in one day in the book of Isaiah. Go up and read it. And that is exactly what happened. So in 1947, in the UN General Assembly, the entire world said Israel needed its own homeland to make sure that this never happens again. And there was a partition between what was Israeli land and the Palestinian land, or whatever these people are, wherever they came from. they were given their own land. Well, what happened is the Arabs rejected the establishment of the state of Israel. And they said, no, wait, even though they had no claim to that land, even though they were essentially nomadic. I mean, if you looked at what was going on in Israel at the time, Israel started to resettle back in the late 1800s. It was called the Zionistic movement. And you had Theodore Herzl, who was kind of leading that charge. Israelis, it was governed by the Ottoman Empire. It was the Turks that actually oversaw Israel at the time. The Jews would buy from the Turks plots of land in Israel at exorbitant prices. I mean, they robbed them. They still bought it. They went in. Many of them died from malaria because a lot of what was going on in Israel, it was swamp. The Arabs never took care of anything. They were basically nomads.
So
Israel gets established as a nation, May 14th, 1948. 5 Arab nations immediately declare war to eradicate the Jews and push them into the sea. And against all odds, because 5 armies against this new country and all these people had come out of the Holocaust, Israel won. And so now they've got these people that were told, okay, the people that we know as the Palestinians today were told to leave their homes. We're going to get rid of Israel. 3 weeks, you'll be able to come back. They didn't win. And what happened? Did Jordan, did Egypt, did Syria, did Lebanon, did they take in these now displaced people? No, they left them there to be a thorn in the flesh of Israel. And so now you've got them in you've got them in the West Bank, and you've got them in the Gaza Strip. And so Israel's left to deal with this problem. Well, Israel starts in one generation. They become an economic power. They, science and everything, because the Jews, wherever they go, they have ambition to succeed. Education's a priority, but the primary reason they succeed is because they have the Torah and they have the commandments of God. And whenever you keep the commandments of God, you are blessed. So now you have Israel is called basically Palestine, and the Arab people wanted nothing to do with that name. 1967 happens. You have the 6-Day War, where Egypt and Syria both attack Israel, but Israel got intel on that and did a preemptive strike. They wiped out the Egyptian Air Force in one day. They just did a bombing run and took out every Egyptian jet. And in 6 days, now Israel has possession of the Golan Heights, and now it has possession of East Jerusalem. Okay? The Palestinian people have no desire to govern themselves. They only understand hate. They only understand death. And wherever they have gone, they have brought Marxist ideology, and they've been kicked out of virtually every other Arab country. So when Israel finally goes on the offensive and says, we're not 1,400 of your own people, that's a declaration of war. They go into Gaza, and now you have demonstrations all over the world saying, from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free. You know what that's saying? So from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean, that's all Palestine, which means that they're declaring that Israel has no right to exist.
And this has been something since 1948, the land was given to Israel. That's being declared over and over and over again.
Yep.
So,
and by the way, I have seen many videos from Arabs. There was a Saudi Arabian guy who said that land belongs to Israel. Palestinians, nobody else wants them. And what he was basically saying is that Netanyahu should just exterminate them. This is from other Arabs.
Okay. So what we know is that the Bible has a record, and archaeological efforts have found that the Bible is accurate of where different locations are. But the main point we were trying to make here with our show, because we're talking to families, we're talking, first of all, have your children learn history.
Right.
It is important to learn history, because what is the saying? Those who do not know history
are doomed to repeat it.
But what we are talking about here is that over generations and generations, there is a conflict. We know that the ultimate beginning of this conflict started in the garden when the snake lied or deceived Eve and said, well, did God really say?
Right.
We know that the Bible says that God put his name in Israel, in Jerusalem. He claimed that for himself. Well, who is he a God of? The only people that worship him and recognize him are the Jewish people and the Christians, really. What we are trying to say, like, there is spiritual, there's historic precedent to what's happening now. We want to talk about the emotional manipulation and the division of people that is happening right now.
And all of this was preamble to say that a lot of these demonstrations are now happening in schools. And you've got college and university campuses. As a matter of fact, you have, what do you call it? You have Harvard University, one of the elite universities across the United States, that have their president has basically made some very anti-Semitic statements, and a lot of the board members are quitting and pulling their funding. You have it happening with Stanford. You have it happening with Yale. So you've got this breeding ground for all of this hatred and all of this division within the schools. I mean, these kids that are at university nowadays, like Milena was saying, they don't know history. They know nothing about this. All they know is what they're being told in the media, that Israel is colonizing and that the poor Arabs, the poor Palestinians who just want to be left in peace. I was even watching a video the other day from a Christian who is trying to give the history of Israel. And he has a point of view that I certainly don't agree with as far as eschatology and everything else. But what he was saying in there was that up until, and what the point he was trying to make was that Israel was, the modern state of Israel was established by the Rothschilds, who are Satanists, and they're brutalizing the Gazan people. They're brutalizing the Palestinian people. And what he said, though, and my jaw just about hit the floor, what he said was that Jews and Christians and Arabs have lived in peace for hundreds of years in Israel. It was like, are you on drugs?
Yeah, it is not a true statement.
Oh my goodness.
Because there are records of many wars that have happened. So what we want to talk about here is the fact, and I really love, so I'm just interrupting myself here, but because I wanted to say that first, I really love, there is a picture, sign, or meme, whatever you call it, that goes on social media, and I agree with it fully. I'm not standing with Israel. I do not stand with Palestine. I do not stand with any country. I stand with the people who are innocent.
Mm-hmm.
I support the people. We need to find our humanity again. So we need to learn history to understand the complexity of the issue. And when there is emotional manipulation happening over generations, and that is because some people's experiences have been difficult over the years,
Mm-hmm.
but we have to remember what is right and what is wrong. We cannot accept that acts of terrorism are justified. There is never a justification. So we have to teach our children history. We have to stand with our fellow brothers and sisters. We have to make sure that our beliefs and ideologies do not change facts. Just like Fauci says, he's science, and all of a sudden we have, just like the whole Soji teaching, I'm teaching my son now cells and genetics and things like that. We need to teach reality. We had so many years of scientific research to find how our genetics work, to find out how our bodies work. Now, we were doing that with the desire to heal and cure and help others. That should be behind everything that we do. And to say it's justified. So now when science is being taken and used under the pretense that we're helping people, meanwhile, risks are known. And I don't want to change this from the political to the medical, but they are mixed because the medical is being politicized.
Well, everything is being politicized.
And so people's suffering is being taken. And so when we stop paying attention to facts, reality, when we stop paying attention to what is right in front of us, one thing that people who have spiritual understanding criticize scientists about, because scientists say things are only validated if you can detect them with your five senses.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, though, we are now even denying our five senses, and we are not dealing with reality anymore. And so the whole world suffered emotional distress by being held captives in their home over 2020, 2021. Now we're in 2023, and we are finally feeling free that we can do stuff. And what is happening? And I think a lot of people are starting to feel, oh, well, we can come out of our homes now. We're not being held in our homes. We are free now. And now we are getting, news of wars and things that are happening around the world. The conflict in Ukraine and Russia is still taking place. There are racial wars, and all of these are being created.
It's all artificial division. And we've talked about this many times before. It's something called wedge politics. And what you do is, in order to keep the people controlled, you pit one group against another. And Yeshua says in the gospel accounts that a house divided against itself cannot stand. And when you have things like critical race theory being taught in schools, and why it's being taught in Canada is still a complete mystery, because we've never had an issue of black on white racism here.
I think people need to read Underground Railroad to Canada.
Yeah.
To remember what Canadian history was. Canada was the country where people of color were seeking refuge because we never knew slavery. We never knew division of races. We never knew. Now, as immigrants from different cultures were coming, were there clashes because of cultural differences? Yeah, absolutely. But that was never a major issue. No. It was never a national issue. And so for us to focus our education time in schools on something that is not something that is an existing issue that needs to be solved, creates the opposite effect. And I have mentioned in previous show, we have a neighbor who was married to, so she's white, and she was married to someone from African background, Jamaican background. And so they had children. And unfortunately, one of them is no longer alive, but the other one, she is in school, in the public school system. And my neighbor said that she never really she never had a concept of racism until that was being taught in school. And under the disguise that, well, we are anti-racism, we're going to have a teaching against racism. And then they would show scenarios of kids kind of being racist to another kid in school. And then her daughter said, this is the first time I've heard about it. And all of a sudden, the kids in my class became aware that we're different, and that, kids of certain color can talk to kids of other color the way. So it was almost like suggestive programming of what, you can act like this because that's what it is.
Let's talk about holiness by showing pornographic movies.
Yeah, so you're not like that, at least, Yeah. So, and the Bible does have an example when a religious, what was he? religious person was praying at the
Oh,
temple.
the Pharisee.
A Pharisee, a religious leader in Israel. And there was someone who recognized he's a sinner. So he went to the temple to ask for forgiveness, and he was praying to God. And while the Pharisee was praying and saying, God, thank you for not making me like that sinner over there.
Yep. And look how good I am.
And you see the story in that Bible goes that the person, the sinner, the one that was labeled sinner, was the one who was forgiven. And the Pharisee, his prayer was not pleasing to God.
Yeah.
So I think the Bible teachings have historic records of people thinking that they're better and than someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And even in God's eyes, that is never the case.
Yeah.
The only thing God hates is sin.
Mm-hmm. And
sin is really harmful to the person who commits it and to the one it is committed against.
Mm-hmm.
But anytime, as a matter of fact, both Jewish and Christian beliefs, well, if they were to follow their scriptures in the Bible, is that the moment we exalt ourselves, God will take care of our pride.
Mm-hmm.
And so just a word of warning that at any point, if any of us think they're better than someone else, that we think we are a higher position than someone else, that we're better, that we're there's something more than someone else, we will encounter a situation where we'll be proven wrong. And so whether this be at home with our spouse and our children, whether it would be in our community, whether it would be countries who are fighting because now, one country thinks they have more of a right to exist than the other, or one country thinks they have the right to kill the people of another country. Now, wars are almost like countries being kept in check, so that they don't, take over the world. But at the same time, we have to understand that no one of us is better than the other. And the moment we start seeking our rights above our neighbors.
But this is what's being taught in the schools. And we have to emphasize again that if your children are in schools, they are being damaged in such ways that you can't even possibly imagine. Because racism is not something that comes natural to us. No. Racism is taught. And I actually address it in my book on the whole history of anti-Semitism. And what we also have to be aware of is that Israel is the canary in the gold mine. And that when hatred and strife starts to rise against Israel, that means it's never going to stop with Israel.
Yeah, and if you're going to say that one country has the right to do something to another country, guess what? Then that will come back to you. The Bible also says
you reap what you sow.
You reap what you sow. So if you justify one country, terrorizing another, then that terror will come upon your country. It will come upon you.
Yeah.
And so that's why we're emphasizing right is right and wrong is wrong. And so the programs in school, by changing history, by providing books. I mean, how many books have I seen in school libraries now? People have taken pictures where it says, well, today I could be a boy, tomorrow I could be a girl. The next day I may not have a gender at all because it's what I feel. So if our reality is going to be determined by how we feel that day, then those who are experts at manipulating our emotions are going to take hold of that. And that's where us saying, I determine who I am by how I feel, they don't realize that they're not free truly as they feel that they are, because then there's emotional manipulation. I mean, how many SPCA, animal shelter commercials have I cried through when I was younger? I was a sucker for those things, I remember, like taking boxes of tissue. Oh no, this puppy really, look at how much he suffered. we are emotional beings.
Mhm.
And so it is not wrong to have emotions. That's what makes us different from AI.
Mhm.
But we have to understand that what's being taught to our children in school, it is very important, because then they're being taught to ignore reality, to ignore that conscience, that voice that's inside them, that we as Christians believe that's the Holy Spirit speaking to us, because Yeshua said that when he rose up, that he's going to leave the Holy Spirit to teach us.
Yeah.
And so each and every one of us has a sense of right and wrong, but we can learn to silence that. And so if somebody suffered trauma, just like the whole world did really, with them being restricted the way we were,
Yep.
then the emotions, now we're seeking comfort, and the government is offering, in Canada here was CERB, and in the States was, I don't know, what was it called? The social assistance that was given for people because of COVID, so our need for comfort was being fulfilled by things that don't fulfill.
Mhm.
And now we're being given philosophies just to make ourselves feel better, because you know what? Reality is harsh right now, because our world has turned upside down. And so teaching critical race theory that, oh, well, the white people did so much wrong that
They're
now they're
oppressors,
bad.
they're colonizers, and now we need reparations.
Just like with Israel.
Yeah.
Is it okay to then put down certain people because of color? Isn't that what we were trying to come against? So all of a sudden, we are doing the same thing that we say we're fighting.
Yeah. And
because we feel emotionally good about it.
And that is the tactic of the enemy, that we always say we're doing one thing when in fact, or they say that they're doing one thing when in fact they're doing the exact opposite. As a matter of fact, if there is a government program named something, you can be rest assured it's doing the exact opposite of it.
Yeah,
if
social assistance.
The Federal Reserve,
the social stealing.
It's not federal and there's no reserve. I mean, it's
so
craziness.
To parents, to families, to teachers, the way I would appeal. And there's another thing that I've seen also going through social media. It says our goal in education should not be to prepare children for a cruel world.
Yeah.
But to raise our children in such a way that they make the world a better place.
Yes.
And so we have to ask ourselves, what we're teaching in schools, is it making the world a better place? Or is it creating more division and cruelty between groups?
And you will know them by their fruit. And what we see in the fruit today, that kids are coming out of school ignorant. They're coming out of school filled with hate. They're coming out of school with completely backwards ideas, and they are no longer a benefit to society.
Well, and also children are being told that if their parents have a different point of view than what is the curriculum teaching at the time, that they need to go tell their parents they're wrong. And one of the foundational values, biblical values, is that the children should honor their parents.
Yes.
And we've spoken about this before. That's the only commandment that says that will give you long life.
Yeah.
So are we speaking life or death through what we
Well, and what this is leading up to is that they're going to start setting up snitch lines that children are going to be able to tattle on their parents, and then the police are going to come and take them away, because that's what happened in communism. We
have spoken before about the book 1984, George Orwell. And the fact that this dystopian future is really upon us. And if any of you want to understand that, read that with your children. I know a lot of homeschoolers who are looking into those hard things. So look into that. And if your school's teaching something, then look into books and history and information to counteract this.
But more than anything else, pull your kids out, get them into a pod, because we will not be teaching anything like that. Yeah. So if you want to understand how to counteract this, we actually have a conference that's coming up, a virtual one, starting next Sunday. And here's a bit of information.
life again to these dry bones. Breath of God from the four winds blow. Breathe life again to these dry bones. Breath of God from the four winds blow. Breathe life again to these dry bones. Breath of God from the four winds blow. Breathe life again to these dry bones. Arise, 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 here now. Arise, 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 here now. Arise.
All right. So we're starting this Sunday, the 12th, and it'll be going through all week. You'll have one program on here right on Messianic Lamb Network every night. And we're going to discuss what it means to be alive in Messiah.
All right.
So we want to thank everybody for joining us once again. Remember, smarten up. Learn what the Word of God has to say about how we raise our kids.
We want to teach our children life and not death. So
Exactly.
be alive and well.
All right. We'll see you everybody next week. Take care.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.